Hi. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 10 of the Tap HR podcast. Can't believe we've actually got to 10 episodes, but we have. We're now also a podcast and on YouTube. And today I am delighted to be joined by Dr. Dunni. So, Dr. Dunni is an award winning mum empowerment coach. She's also a best selling author of Every Mum is a Super Mum. You can see it there in the background. She's an international speaker, and I'm not sure how she manages to fit it in, but she's also a practicing family doctor. So, Dr. Dunni, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You are more than welcome. So today we're going to have a chat about maternity leave. We're probably going to have a fair amount of giggles as well. I've got some questions like I normally have when I go through things, but we're hopefully just going to have a general conversation and try and frame the conversation around both empowering mothers and also talking a little bit about what companies can be doing to help mothers as well. So, first question to start off with is, what do you think are the typical concerns that women might have when they're going on maternity leave?
One of the main things I have found, and this is coming from my friends, family members who are going on maternity, my colleagues, and some of my patients as well, is, well, I'm going on maternity leave. Will I be able to sustain my lifestyle on maternity pay?
Mm-hmm.
Do I need to come back sooner? And the third thing people tend to worry about is, so if I come back sooner, would I be ready? Would my child be ready?
Mm-hmm.
So those are some main concerns when it comes to maternity leave.
Mm. And what do you think women can deal with that third point in particular? So I'm a mum myself as well, and I think there's always that kind of mother's guilt when you've had a little one and then you need to go back into the workplace. What advice do you give to mothers in terms of being able to deal with that?
Yeah, so that's a very tough one, I must say, because when it comes to dealing with your emotions, it's a lot deeper.
Mm.
And remember, during your pregnancy phase and post delivery, you're still very hormonal. You've got lots of hormones flooding through you. So there are quite a few things that might just normally upset you and you kind of push it in the back of your mind. But then when you are post delivery, early periods, or your tail end of pregnancy, you could cry on that thing quite a bit more. So it's almost as though your emotions are heightened.
Mm-hmm.
So the guilt that you feel is even worse
Mm.
because it feels like, oh my goodness, I can't take care of my child. I would miss my child smiling. I would miss my child crawling. I would miss my child standing. And I mean, those are lovely moments. What I tend to tell mothers is everything you do is for a reason. Now, knowing what you know at this point, you might see yourself that going beyond 3 months, 6 months is not going to be financially sustainable. So you need to get back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Or perhaps there is a career goal that would not permit you to take so long off work because you have a trajectory. That is to make life better for you and that child.
Mm.
And looking at it as an offering that you're bringing to improve your lives, whether it's your ambition or it's for a financial reason or whatever that is, use that as your crutch to say, because I'm doing this, when I'm with my child, either at nighttime or if you work a shift where in the early hours of the morning when you come back from your night shift, be present with that child. That is what counts. It's not the quantity, it is the quality.
I love that. Thank you. And is there anything that you think companies can do to help people who are feeling this way? I mean, I think a lot of what you said there was obviously your emotions are there for a reason, but there's medical reasons why they might be heightened. But your response was kind of more grounded in what are the practical things that you can do and what's the positive that you can give. What do you think companies can do to help women who are feeling that way?
Mm. I think, well, companies, and I think this is something that for a very long time, women have been kind of pushing forward and say, look, we have this thing that we do where we go off work, we have children, but we still are able to come back. one main thing that companies can do is not make the woman feel guilty for being off work.
Mm-hmm.
That's one very important thing, because everybody has got their different natal, perinatal, and postnatal story.
Mm.
Someone could go on maternity leave, and usually you plan maternity leave way ahead of time. So you tell your employer and then that you are pregnant and you submit all the necessary paperwork. Sometimes you would say you would go on maternity leave 1 week before you're due to deliver. But what happens if you've got a premature rupture of your membranes?
Mm.
Or you develop some form of preterm labor? Your child decides they want to be born early. What happens then?
Mm.
So that can be the employee scenario. The employers or the company need to be understanding, helping this woman to navigate through by not making her feel more guilty. And sometimes, of course, we in companies, we've got the private and the public companies, like government companies. And sometimes it can be a bit more challenging maybe it's the smaller companies when it comes to finding a replacement or working with the human resources department. We need to put very women, pregnancy, and maternity friendly policies. Because, like it or not, I mean, I know we're both women here, and there are probably women who will be listening to this, but there'll be some men listening as well. But like it or not, women are so creative, so productive, so wonderful in problem solving, empathy, and the works they do. And so when you have a woman in your workforce, even if she's childbearing age, you might just wonder that, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? But you can actually change that and make it better by putting those policies in place.
I totally agree. No worries. It's usually me, to be fair. So do you need to get that? I'm conscious that you are a doctor, so it's your services.
No, it's absolutely fine. It is an alarm.
Okay, good. So I also think, from a HR perspective, I completely agree with you. And I think it's really important to have those family-friendly policies, and also really important to have policies that aren't just really like thick and hard to understand. If somebody's pregnant or adopting or anything that goes for kind of family-friendly, what you don't want to be doing is going through a massive wad of policies. You just want to be nice and clear. So I suppose building on what you were saying there and thinking about women when they're on maternity leave, I think some of the things I've heard in the past is that women feel a little bit isolated when they're on maternity leave. When I think about my maternity leave all those years ago now, it was a little bit isolating. So I'm at home, I had twins, so I had twin babies, work and the world was obviously going on without me outside, but I wasn't necessarily, and I think there is obviously a part to play on my part, like I could have been more involved in my workplace, but there was kind of a little bit of a feeling of isolation in terms of not being at work, not necessarily understanding what was happening anymore. What kind of advice would you give to women who maybe might be feeling that way?
Yeah, that's a good one, because isolation is not a great thing. We kind of had a feel of that with the pandemic, and of course when you have people being away from work, especially if work has been a huge part of their life, it can be almost as though you've chopped a limb off or taken a part of them away. And one very important thing I've found is man is not meant to be alone or work alone. Even if you're on maternity leave, finding a support system is important. So for the mothers, what they can do, especially when it comes to the postnatal period, join baby groups or mother baby groups. Sometimes you would have, I know, of course, for those who are listening in the UK, you have a red book. And in that red book, usually your health visitor will put some information about maybe local children's centers. Your local library is a good place where you have maybe breastfeeding groups, supportive networks, women who come and say, oh my goodness, this is how my delivery went. How is yours going? Are you still feeling this? Oh, yes, I am. And you can rub minds together. It's such a beautiful thing. when I gave birth to my daughter, I found it very useful going for those sessions because apart from the singing and the dancing and the clapping that we do with the child either sleeping in the pram or wanting to breastfeed, they kind of it kind of makes you feel that not being alone.
Mm.
And then when it comes to work, there are some places of work that have this drop-in days. So you can pop in to the office like once or twice. And that's something you can discuss with your employer. So you're not totally out of the loop of correspondence or training or new things. So with that, you can drop in and have that half day, could be, or maybe a couple of hours. And that's something that is flexible, that both the business, the companies, the mother can agree on, usually before that time, before the post-delivery time. So it's usually very useful because that helps with the the feeling of isolation that mothers can feel, especially post-delivery.
I completely agree. I think those keeping in touch days are really, really important. I think sometimes it can be a little bit scary having to do keeping in touch days, but I think it's really important to kind of cross that barrier and all the good stuff that you've already told us about and be able to get back in the workplace. Awesome stuff. Okay. What about contacting women in maternity leave? So again, from my kind of HR experience, sometimes managers or companies are a little bit nervous of contacting women. So it kind of goes hand in hand a little bit with that isolation. If you've got companies that don't want to contact you and you're feeling a little bit isolated, it all kind of creates a bit of a perfect storm. Yes. Any advice for companies who are a bit nervous about contacting mothers, and equally any advice for mothers who we want to empower to kind of take back kind of control and be in control of their working situation around communication?
Okay, yeah, and that's a very vital question because yes, both parties are quite nervous and they're like, oh, I don't want to step on toes, I don't want to cross a boundary, and it's very understandably so. So one thing I would say, starting from the company's point of view, is know that you're dealing with a human. You are also humans. You might be a company, but you're humans. If an employee of yours has given birth, you can send a message of congratulations, even if they've started the maternity leave. And I know in quite a few places that I work, and I've worked over the last few years, I have noticed there are some company culture that you would love to have spread across many companies. And that is the company culture of togetherness. So you have people going on holiday and they take a picture of the slope or the rainbow and something they saw that was fascinating and they share it via email. It's just that bonding. So in my own place of work, because apart from the other things you mentioned that I do, I also teach medical students at the university. So some of my colleagues have gone on maternity leave and they would send pictures of their young ones. And we're like, oh, so cute. And it's so good because they feel isolated. We will be like, oh, do we contact them? Do we not contact them? But that time you can send a message. There could be someone in either the HR department, the line manager, a named person to say, oh, how are you? Maybe every quarter, if you don't want it to be too frequent. Every month, every quarter, how are you? Is there anything you need? How's it going? Any support? Is there any messages you want sent to anyone? And that's goodwill coming from the company would make this person want to come back, And I think it's just remembering the humanness within us, that connectedness within us is so important.
I love that.
And then when you think about from the woman's point of view, you need to remember that the company, as big an establishment as it is, even if you're working in the Fortune 500s, you have a team, an immediate team. You have a contact person. Communication is key. Sometimes you would say, oh, how are things going? You might have a friend at the office. Maybe you don't have a friend, but maybe you have a line manager or colleague or someone. You can say, how are things going? How's that project going? Oh, you can always ask questions. And of course, having that keeping in touch day is another very important thing you can do as well. I tend to see that especially when it's coming towards the end of the maternity leave, people tend to get a bit nervous because they're getting ready to return. One good way that mothers can prepare themselves is by signing up to staff update sessions. We have this thing we call continued professional development in the medical world. So you can sign up for one, maybe a webinar where you will see your colleagues on the screen. So you don't have to leave. But if you want to go in person into the office, you can go in. Most companies have got their websites or their intranets. Get on there, get on one or two trainings as you're getting towards the tail end of your leave, and just getting to integrate back slowly and in a way that is comfortable for you.
I love that. And I think it's also super important and top tip for employers. Make sure that you've got an email address that that the person who's going to check is relevant for. So I think in the past I've had companies doing all of the right things and sending stuff to people, but to their work email address, and that mother isn't checking their work email address. So that kind of cycle of feeling isolated is continuing, and the employer's doing the right thing, but actually nobody's seeing the information. But I think definitely easing your way in, I think, is a really, really good thing to do too. Another thing that I've seen is women who are kind of coming back from maternity leave feeling as though their skills have kind of degraded, or maybe a little bit of imposter syndrome kicking in and feeling like, oh, I haven't done it for a little while, can I still do it? I mean, what advice would you give to the same thing, both women who are feeling that way, and is there anything that employers can be doing to help women who are feeling that way too?
Yeah, I absolutely love that question because I've been there, done that, got the plaque. So yes, imposter syndrome, that feeling that you've lost everything. Oh my goodness, the pregnancy brain, and then everything else that we talk about. But one thing I need us to recognize is before you went off work, when you got that job, you were skilled. You were found to be competent and trainable. That's why you got the job you got. The fact that you've gotten pregnant and given birth does not make you less of who you are. So that's very important, because one of the things that makes us start to think that we're not good enough is when we start to question who we are, when we start to question our worth. If at all you are more emotionally open to receive, and that is so important. That's one thing that makes us different from the other gender, because when you are emotionally open and you are allowing yourself to utilize the innate emotional awareness that we have as women, you can solve problems that the muscles and the grits and all those things, the big machinery cannot solve, because your intuition is sound. And so remembering who you are is so important. The second thing is, I know sometimes we have this thing we call the competence loop, because if you feel more competent, you will feel more confident. And when you do things, when you come out in confidence, then you do it and oh gosh, I guess I can do that. And then you feel more, and it's just a wonderful loop. But we need to get your confidence up. Some people get confidence by looking at their past achievements. And that's one reason why I tell people, when you've achieved anything, don't hide it under a rock. Culturally, when I was brought up, you were told, don't blow your trumpet, let other people blow it for you. But I soon found out that doesn't work. You need to blow your trumpet. Do you know who I am? Do you know what I have achieved? Do you know how many alphabets are behind my name? That kind of thing. It's not an element of pride. It's an element of knowing your worth. So sometimes you might need to go and look at that wall that has got all those plaques and certificates that you've achieved and say, yes, I'm good. I'm that good. And that confidence will make you start to feel confident. Some people, do not maybe rely on the visual aspect. They want to do, those are the more tactile people, kinesthetic people. And they would want to do a training or do a quiz. And when they get the result, they're like, yes, I still got it. And then they feel more confident because of doing. We need to increase our awareness of the way we are. So mothers that are getting ready to get back to work, I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? Am I good enough? Start to notice, what is that thing that makes you feel confident? Is it by looking at your achievements? Is it by doing things? And then you take action, just a little action. You don't have to read the whole world and, do all the tests. No, you just a little action. Very important. Now, back to the employers. It's very important that they have available refreshers, either a refresher training or a skills course that the employees can gain access to. For example, I had a friend who worked in IT and had not worked for a long time. Now, the IT world is evolving. What was working yesterday is old news and out the window today. So she felt very incompetent. I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know. I mean, I was doing Cisco and Java, but right now, who's talking that now? It was a lot to deal with. But we had to work on her confidence, and then her competence started to show. And that's why we need to be aware of our strong points and use that little strong points that we think to build that confidence up.
Can you just follow me around and provide me with coaching and guidance? I feel like I need a Dr. Dunni shaped coach that's just there to provide me with confidence on a daily basis. Fab, I've got it recorded. Everybody's heard you and seen you nodding.
Yes.
Alrighty, sorry, back to the sensible stuff. Flexible working requests then. So obviously people can make flexible working requests regardless of having baby. But when women are coming back to work and looking to make flexible working requests, and in particular they're thinking about reducing down their hours, so we talked about this a little bit earlier. What advice or what guidance do you give women who are saying, oh, I've got to reduce down my hours, or maybe I've got some financial concerns, or they're not sure about reducing down their hours?
Oh, right. Okay, now that's a very good one. I like that because it's looking at practical things, but also looking at their most urgent need. So when it comes to reducing hours, first of all, we need to kick guilt out the window. Okay. Now I know this may not sail very well with employers, but I need to say it. If your employee were to become unwell or they passed away, would you say, oh my goodness, this is the worst thing ever? No, we're not going to fill that post. We're going to leave that post in honor of this person that passed away. No, you're going to fill it quick. So mothers, bear that in mind. If you need to reduce your hours, now that you have a child, please don't feel guilty. I'm going to just bring together a study that was done and give that information. There was a study that women who are working and have children or have a child, one child, and they're working, are 20 times more stressed than women doing the same work who do not have children. Now, there's very interesting parts. If that woman has got 2 children, that stress level jumps up to a whooping 40%. Now, you can imagine what is going to happen to the women that have 3, 4, 5 children. Good Lord, you can't even begin to imagine. So you need to recognize that your stress level as a mother goes higher. You will need to look at your workload, your capability, and then reduce accordingly. But most importantly, don't feel guilty for reducing your hours. Another very important thing, and thankfully the time has come where there's a lot of talk about work-life balance. You do need balance. I tend to talk more about harmony. things need to flow and move smoothly between work and life. Because if you are not functional and in balance at home, you're going to be chaotic at work. So you need to have that flow. So very importantly, do not feel guilty reducing your hours. And from the employer's point of view, make it open. Most people have started to see that it's very important for them to make flexibility when it comes to work, and also make available this less than full time and other things like that. Now, from the financial point of view, because I mean, nobody's going to pay you a full salary when you're working 60%. Seriously, no, nobody's going to do that. But one thing I need to tell each and every woman here, you are creative. And that is one of your superpowers. I talk about superpowers in my book, Every Mom is a Super Mom. One of your superpowers is your creativity. There are some things that maybe you used to do maybe as a hobby or something, and you enjoy doing it. Most times it's linked to creativity. Tap into that. And you can actually use that as a means of a side hustle, a small side business, a big business if you want to start big, and then get that as another stream of income. I believe that each person should have at least 3 to 4 streams of income.
Oh, well, that's a lot.
Now, do you know, I mean, I tend to, when I talk about well-being, I look at the holistic view. And being Christian, I would tend to quote a spiritual book, which is the Bible. In the Bible, it is said we should have 7 streams of income. So you can imagine and that's in the book of Proverbs. I'm like, oh my goodness, Proverbs, that's where the wisdom is. So 7 streams of income. Okay, we've got some work to do, but that tells you that relying on just one source of income is not the wisest thing to do. So even though you're reducing your hours, don't rest on your laurels. Look at where your strengths are, your creative juices are, and utilize them.
Love that. And I think there's another kind of HR tip here for employers is make sure you've got a clear policy. Like you said, be open, but also, again, make it as easy as possible for people to apply. Obviously, you don't want people taking the mick, but you do want a nice, clear policy that makes it simple. And if you don't have one, quick Google search will show you kind of what your requirements are on the government website in terms of flexible working request. So to the kind of slightly more serious side of things, obviously there are devastating situations where women do kind of go on maternity leave and they might kind of suffer a loss, which, obviously is incredibly difficult for them. What advice would you give to women who are in that situation and thinking about coming back to the workplace? And then, same as before, is there anything in particular that you think employers can be doing to provide somebody who's gone through such as, devastating loss with support?
Oh, gosh, yeah. It is very challenging when a mother goes on maternity leave and comes back and has had a loss. I can't even begin to imagine what that feels like. It's very important to recognize that you need some support. I know some people have had this happen, and they just said, okay, maybe I've had some time off work. It's time to go back. And they don't get that support or counseling or anything. I would encourage any mother that goes through this, please do get bereavement counseling. Sometimes there are some groups. Now, there are many reasons why there is a loss. Sometimes it's an early neonatal loss. Sometimes it's in pregnancy, the period. But then you also have children who maybe born preterm and after a few days, unfortunately pass away. In that kind of scenario, they're usually very the supportive groups. And in those supportive groups, you're able to say, can I, you have people who've been there and who can support you, who can give you the advice or signpost you to the right people. So very importantly, do not be isolated. It's a sad time. I agree when you're grieving, but that's not the time to shut everybody out. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if you're not ready, you're not ready. Bereavement is one of those very tricky ones because as a family doctor, I have people who maybe I know that they've had a recent bereavement, and unfortunately, they can't find the thing within them to go to work. It's really challenging. And I do understand completely. But of course, they are worried about their employer, thinking, oh, he's taking so much time off. So I think that communication needs to be had. You need the support, not only from your local, maybe the childcare area, your doctor, or therapist or bereavement counselors. You also need from your human resource department. You can't. You're right. While some people might be private, I know some people are very private. They don't like people knowing their business. In that scenario, sometimes you need to let people know what you're going through, because then they understand and then they can support you as required. Very important. Okay. Now, from the company's point of view, now that's a tricky one because they have a business to run. And while the woman who is on maternity leave is not back at work, they probably need to employ a temporary staff to cover. So they're still paying, more than one person's salary. And I do understand where that's coming from, of course, but they need to recognize that humanity there. Okay. Now, I know from the government point of view, businesses who have employees that are on maternity pay, the statutory maternity pay, will still need to continue to pay even if the child has passed away. So the only time that they don't do that is if they've stopped, even if they have stopped trading, they still need to pay. So which I think is a very good government policy, because that kind of helps the mother. And of course, the business will probably have insurance, so they can of course claim from that. So it's something that I think will be very important for the communication to flow between mother and the company or employers.
And I think from a company perspective as well, I think when it comes to bereavement, I think sometimes in HR we have, we allow people to have a certain amount of days. And I think when it comes to kind of bereavement or loss, everybody's experience of that is going to be really different. And saying that there's a certain amount of days and then someone can come back, that's never really sat well with me. But, obviously you've made the point around if somebody has a loss during maternity leave, that maternity leave continues. Okay. Just trying not to cough then. Okay. Anything else that you would like to go over that you think would be useful?
Yeah. So, first of all, I want to remind those listening, motherhood is beautiful. Motherhood is so special. It's the best job, role, status I could ever think of. And while, of course, it has its own challenges, it has all the things that make you think, why did I do this again? It's something that we need to cherish. However, as lovely and as challenging, and as much as we need to cherish it, we need to cherish ourselves more and give ourselves grace. And that's why I always say every mom is a super mom. Not because of the super things that she does, but because of the superpowers she possesses within. And so even on those days when you are under the duvet crying, you are a super mom. Do not ever forget that. Because your cape, yes, it can be used for flying. Yes, it can be used for taking care of your children and protecting your children. It can also be your own cuddle cloak where you just cover yourself and cry. But know that those tears that you shed are serving as a means of wiping your eyes, that you can see clearly where you're going, because you are enough. and you are wonderful, and you are a super mom.
Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Dunni. I really, really, really enjoyed this conversation. Probably a little bit too much, to be fair. How can people get hold of you? So I suppose first things first, if they want to get a copy of the book, so Every Mum's a Super Mum, where can they go to get hold of your book?
So the book is available. And so thank you, first of all, for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure. I love talking to moms. I love empowering mothers. So that's one reason why I try to make this available as much as possible. What you can do is you can go on Amazon and get the book. Every Mom is a Super Mom, anywhere in the world, really. And then you can also, if you wanted to, get a signed copy from my website. So it's www.drdunni.com/signed book. And you will be able to get a signed copy mailed out to you with some goodies as well, so which is good.
Okay, I'll be doing that after this.
And yes, other ways that people could get in touch with me, I'm available on all social media platforms, Julie Dr. Dunni. So you can reach out to me. I'm so excited to meet and connect with people. So that, yes.
Amazing. Well, thank you again so much for your time. Really, really appreciate it. Hopefully, we'll get to do this again because it's fun.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you again for giving us your time. I appreciate that when you're practicing doctor and all the other things that you do, your time is very kind of built up. So I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Fab. Speak soon.